Right, that time has come, ladies and gentlemen, for my guest tonight here on Soho Radio, who I've been a fan of for a very long time. He's a certified jungle veteran and he's on the verge of releasing his second studio album, Everything and Nothing, on his very own label, Lossless Music. So I'm delighted to say that here's me catching up with the one and only Soul Intent. Right, so as you lot know, every month I am joined by someone who I think is doing fantastic things in the world of underground music, be it drum and bass, breaks, dubstep. You know, if they're making moves, I want to talk to them. And this month, I am so delighted to be joined by a guy who I have been aware of for quite a while. And equally, who has been doing so much for so long. And it's just so nice to finally have him on tonight's show. Alex Judd, a.k.a. Soul Intent. How are you, my man?
Yes, D. Thanks for having me on, mate. Nice to be here.
You know, so you have been around for a long, long time now, you know. 2005 was when you first started your musical endeavors by setting up Brutal Recordings under the name Dataset, which was essentially you and a bunch of other guys as part of a collective. But from there on, you know, you went on to release music on various labels like 31 Records, Commercial Suicide, Skeleton Press, Repertoire, which essentially then led you up to starting Lossless Music in 2013 with the sub-labels Dubplates and Excursions, which brings us up to date in terms of where we are now. For the listeners who are new to you, why don't you tell us a bit about your musical journey?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, when you sort of put it all together like that, it sounds like I've done a fair bit, but I still kind of feel like I'm very much still, you know, learning the trade and sort of kind of new to it all. But I guess, going right back to being at school, discovering music through my brother, the sort of the music and the CDs he was buying, sort of Jungle Mania, the Prodigy Experience album, some of these sort of RNS compilations. So he was sort of very much electronic music based, but sort of rave, techno, ambient. So he was very much I would just steal his CDs and listen to that stuff. And that's really kind of started to open my eyes to sort of electronic music and the rave scene. There's also things like MTV Party Zone. I don't know if you remember that back in the day.
Of course.
Friday night, yeah. So Simone Angel hosting this show that was on about 3 a.m. for when all the clubbers were coming back. So we had one of these tape players that you could set a timer. So we'd record it and then watch it Saturday morning. And it was just sort of, again, like this window into this world of crazy DIY music videos from like Suburban Bass and the Prodigy and those sort of guys, and Simone Angel doing interviews in clubs, and just sort of seeing this window into this kind of world that I was still too young. I was at school, wasn't going out to all of this, so it was kind of watching those kind of programs and things. You kind of saw what was kind of happening, and then sort of tape packs were starting to get circulated at school. So the Helter Skelter and the Dreamscape raves, and that was again sort of hearing music, but in a DJ environment, in a club environment, and hearing MCs and hearing the vibe from the crowd and stuff. I just remember being like, oh man, that just sounds incredible. I just want to go to these places and experience it. So that was kind of opened my eyes to it. And then get into college, get into uni, starting to DJ, get in with the local promoters, worked quite a lot around Nottingham in the Midlands, and then just got to a point, the Brutal Recordings thing was happening, but it was a bit of a short-lived thing. There's a lot of people involved, so sometimes that can be, people starting to lose interest, but I still had this drive and this sort of passion. I wanted to do more. I was doing gigs, but I was only getting warm-up gigs because I was sort of a local known DJ, but that was it. So, a few people said, listen, you're a great DJ, but if you want to get further up the bill, you just need to start getting tunes out there. So I'd kind of been dabbling with it, but I just thought, right, okay, I need to now put some proper time and effort in to be able to do it myself, not have to rely on maybe doing it with mates, just so it's all on me, so I can do it as and when I want. And yeah, luckily enough, after a couple of years of doing that, setting a few demos off, and Marianne Hobbs was one of the first to pick a tune up. So again, these sort of moments in your career that really you feel are kind of pivotal. She was sort of massive. Well, she still is massive, but she was massive because she was really championing dubstep. So she had a really big audience. So to get a tune on her Radio 1 show was crazy. And it's also like you and Nerm, like I sort of sending a lot of demos out. So when you guys were on the Asian Network, I think, and started to get on your guys' radar, and it was just so exciting for me. Finally, sort of, we all want that kind of maybe reassurance that what we're doing is okay. So
it's that sense of validation, and I get it.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
I'm on both sides of the mic. When you finally achieve those moments of hearing your music being played on a radio show, it's just that amazing feeling of validation. You're like, yeah, do you know what? All of that work is actually counting towards something. People care.
I still do now. Like if I get a radio play, I still feel just as excited seeing my name on that playlist as I did 15 years ago. So I mean, I think again that sort of keeps me going. That kind of excitement is not really sort of disappeared. So that's a big sort of motivator for me, is to still get that validation, to sort of get that kind of feedback from those producers and DJs and people that I kind of look up to. And because we all have our mates and our partners that go, oh, that sounds nice, I really like that, but you go yeah but if it's somebody like that you've got on a bit of a pedestal, when they say it, you suddenly, it means a bit more then, doesn't it?
Totally get it. Yeah, absolutely get that for sure. So it's essentially that brought you up to releasing your first album in 2017, right? Delusions of Grandeur. Tell us a bit about that.
So I guess it was a bit of it was more of a sort of plan thing, I suppose, because I was sort of aware that it was 10 years from my first sort of solo release back in 2007. So I kind of wanted to mark it with something. So, and a lot of people had said like, oh, have you've not done an album or anything yet, have you? You've been releasing for quite a while. And I think I was quite happy doing singles and EPs. I had a couple of offers, but nothing really that I thought would really work. But having a label, you have your own platform, you have complete kind of creative control on it. So it was sort of hitting that sort of 10-year anniversary, and I thought, actually, do you know what? I kind of feel like I want a bit more of a meaty project to do. And I'd sort of just relocated recently from Nottingham down to sort of Bromley, where I am now. So I think a change of scenery really helped with the creativity. I was sort of being really productive in the studio, so it kind of felt like the right time to do it, and it came together quite nicely. And it was a sort of, I think, giving myself a deadline helped, that I sort of had something to work towards. But the artwork, I kind of had lots of ideas quite early on about what I wanted to do. So it came, luckily enough, it came together quite quickly, because I had a bit of a sort of a timeline and a deadline to work towards. But it was nice to get that out there. It was something new to talk about, sort of trying some different sort of music, working a bit more with vocalists. So, it's all very much of that part of that learning curve, really.
Amazing. I think one of the biggest lessons is learning how to finish their work. We've all been through that phase where you're like umming and ahhing about, is it finished, how much more does it need to be done to it, blah blah blah. The second you can figure out your own process or form your own process, therefore be able to set a realistic deadline, that's when you've really hit dry land, and that's when your creativity can really start flowing, and the reason why I'm making it a point is because there is a process to get to that point. It's quite a dark phase that you have to start off in, but then once you find your rhythm and you find that timeline, you find that process, that's when things really start moving.
But also, what's quite reassuring is we all have those dips and moments where it doesn't.
Of course, yeah.
It's good, like listening to interviews from other people. I remember Marcus Intellects, hearing him say, he was saying some of his frustrations and how he works on a tune all afternoon, thinks it's great, and then suddenly he'll wake up the next morning and he'll try and mix it with a Calibre tune or something, and he just starts crying. In the bin. And hearing that, you get that kind of you understand it's not just you. Everyone, even people think the gods, they have the same.
Everyone goes through the pain,
and they just feel like they've wasted the day. So it's as you say, it's great. You kind of get a workflow and you kind of understand how you work, but it's very up and down. And I think, as bad as this year's been, actually, it's been a very productive year because of having a bit more time to sort of just work on stuff, rather than sort of trying to sort of maybe juggle it with sort of the 9-to-5 stuff as much.
Yeah, I think everyone, whether they know it or not, have been gifted the one thing that they've always probably moaned they don't have enough of, which is time and headspace.
Yeah. As bad as this year's been, that's a real, I think, for me, I think I'm very lucky that, there's people, particularly people that maybe live alone and don't have hobbies that they can do at home. I sort of rubbed my hand and went, oh, okay, that's not the worst thing yet. I'll just fire up the studio, and And luckily having a partner that's very understanding and is quite happy to sort of let me, disappear into the man cave for the afternoon. It's kind of crummy as this year's been. It's been, I've been able to use that time productively rather than sort of just, admittedly, I've watched my fill of Netflix as well, don't get me wrong, but.
Of course. Which basically brings us up to your forthcoming album, Everything and Nothing, which has been, the byproduct of this time at home during COVID, right?
It kind of was, but actually the story is, it was kind of ready at Christmas. And I thought, okay, I'm going to maybe look at sort of a March release time. And then obviously lockdown and COVID happened. And I thought, well, I want to just see how this plays out, because maybe now isn't, probably like a lot of people did, that they just held off to sort of see. And then I thought the year, it got later in the year, and I thought, well, actually, if I'm waiting for everything to be okay again, it could be that, we might be having this conversation this time next year. So I sort of got to a point where I sort of thought, oh, okay, I'm just going to get it out there. But it was good because one of the tracks was a track I did in lockdown, and it just thought that needs to be on the album. So as much as the album was kind of already ready, because of having lockdown and having that extra time, I did a tune that's actually one of my favorites that's managed to get on the album. So again, weirdly enough, because of circumstance and what happened, the album actually is coming out different to what it would have been if COVID had never happened. So it's, it's just weird how these things come about.
Beautiful. There's always a silver lining, always.
Yeah.
You speak about this album reaching back over 25 years worth of sound and culture that you've been inspired by, in particular, the 90s culture. Who would you say were your main influences and inspirations from the 90s?
It was kind of like everything. I think for a label that nailed everything, the artwork, the sort of branding, the artist, is Metalheads. I mean, Logical Progression and Good Looking, that was amazing. Prodigy, I was a massive Prodigy fan, Chemical Brothers, but I think a label and a kind of camp that sort of just has consistently stayed on my radar and been that sort of holy grail is Metalheads, and sort of their Platinum Breaks compilation. Discovering that, my mate had it, used to sort of just go over to his house, and they had like a little hi-fi in the living room, and they'd be watching TV, and I'd have the headphones on, just sort of listening to it. It wasn't like I was impoverished and I couldn't buy the CD, but I just ended up, every time I went around there, I'd sort of find an excuse to sort of listen to it. And that, I think, it was an album. It had its highs, its lows, its sort of melodic tunes, its heavier tunes. It just summed everything up for me as sort of what kind of this music could be. And I still now, very much outside of the sort of Everything and Nothing project, is still music that I reference and I sort of use to inspire me, because I just, we all kind of have rose tinted glasses and all that, it's never as good as it used to be. But I think there was a period where, for me and what I like, that album just sort of just nails so much of it. So I very much, if I could sort of pinpoint it down to sort of one thing, that album, the artwork, the Heads logo, just that to me still has an influence today.
And speaking about the track titles that you've got on there, which are very interesting, I'd like to know more about them, especially track 11, Deckard's Lullaby.
Okay. Yeah, so Deckard's Lullaby was really more me just being a bit of a sci-fi fan, and obviously if you're into sci-fi, Blade Runner is a film that's going to be up there. And I'd sort of playing around. I've got over the last few years, I've got a bit more into sort of outboard gear. So I've got a few sort of outboard synths, and there's one called the OB6, which is an Oberheim Dave Smith collaboration. And Oberheim, their equipment is what Vangelis used a lot in the creation of the Blade Runner soundtrack. And yeah, it was just a tune. It was like they had the break for a little while. I just had to I kind of work in these things where I'll sort of put ideas in folders, so I start to get a little folder of ideas that have the same kind of vibe, and that kind of, whether it's an EP or that turns. So I had these ideas, and that was sort of an old school kind of beat that I think again was on a Rider's Ghost or something, like this original kind of hip hop break. And started doing it, and it got this sort of melodic vibe, and then I was playing with the synths, and I found this kind of Vangelis sort of wobbly kind of piano-y chord thing, and it just came together. And yeah, I kind of wanted to, I like to sort of, if I can, sort of maybe reference inspirations in the track names and things, so it just kind of, Decad's Lullaby kind of fitted the vibe of the track, and yeah, I think that one musically is probably one of the tracks I'm probably most proud of, and certainly from starting to sort of send it out to people, that seems to be sort of getting quite a lot of positive feedback. But also Standard Deluxe, the first track, is an old sort of skate surf brand that I remember. There used to be this shop in Swindon called Free Spirit, and you go in there and there's all the kind of rave stuff, so Dreddy, Custard Shop.
Oh God, I remember those. I had all of the outfits. Yeah, Blue Bolt, do you remember Blue Bolt?
yeah, sort of, it's all of that stuff. And I just thought it'd be quite cool to reference some of these things that I remember. It's quite self-indulgent, this project. I suppose maybe all projects are from the sort of artist point of view. So I kind of wanted to just for those other aging ravers, I just wanted to put these little things there, just so we kind of go. Do you remember? Yeah. So Standard Deluxe was, I just thought, yeah, that'll work. And then Tribal Gathering, that has a kind of tribal kind of feel because of the drums and percussion anyway, but also it's a big, I never went to it again because I was too young, but there was a massive rave that Universe put on called Tribal Gathering, and the flyer was like a comic, and still people sort of say, like, it's the sort of, it was the best flyer ever because it was almost like this 3-page comic. So yeah, there's those little kind of references to things I remember from that era as well, just because I was just kind of love that stuff.
Okay, fantastic. So I believe it's now time for you to drop your exclusive 30-minute dubplate mix right here, right now on Soho Radio. What do you got for us?
So yeah, obviously album tracks. Again, because of the time we've had this year, there's lots of new music, so I've sort of put in some stuff. So there's a track that's forthcoming on 31, a track that's forthcoming on Commercial Suicide, some stuff that's not even signed yet. So I wanted to make sure that I brought some goodies for you. So yeah, it's kind of just a bit of everything. So it's, some dark stuff, some lighter stuff, some funky stuff. Just kind of trying to, represent what I do, as well as sort of, kind of showcasing the album.
Fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear Soul Intent in the mix.
there's many ways to describe what one sees. It's not really seen it like it sees like it's a revelation. You see your own true nature. You realize it. It just comes out of that moment where you stopped. An absolute, infinitely conscious nothing. It sounds bad? Don't worry about it. Nothing and everything. That's it. You're nothing and you're everything. Nothing and everything. You've suspected it all along.
You're locked into Soho Radio, it's Decode, it's Friday night, and you just heard this month's guest, Soul Intent, in the mix. That was absolutely solid, my man. Thank you so much for that. Now, speaking about your forthcoming album, Everything and Nothing, all I'm going to say is I can't wait for this album to drop, man. I really think people are going to connect with it. Whether they're the old ravers or the young ravers, you know, there's definitely a sense of authenticity to it, which is going to resonate.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
And people can expect that to drop on Bandcamp on the 22nd of January. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I typically, to try and just give some love to the people that support us directly, I try to always sort of let the Bandcamp crew have it a little bit early. So I think that's about 2 weeks before the general release of the 5th of Feb. So general release is, you know, if the record stores and the digital stores, that's just a whole worldwide thing. But certainly just sort of as a little thank you to the people that support us directly, because particularly somebody that does vinyl, and you know, it is quite expensive, and it can be sort of sometimes be something that you think, oh, why am I still doing this? So the Bandcamp crew and them supporting us directly still enables us to do that. So anything that I can do to sort of give a bit of love back to those guys, whether it's freebies or sort of an earlier release date, I try to do that just to sort of just show a bit of love, really.
Amazing. Cannot wait for it to drop. And if listeners want to find out more about you online or follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, well, there's so many sort of social media channels now. So I've got a Linktree thing that's all my Soul Intent stuff, but basically Twitter, Instagram and Facebook is just Soul Intent DNB. Or if you go to the label Bandcamp page, which is losslessmusic.co.uk, it's all kind of linked together. So if you find one page, you'll typically find links for the others. But yeah, we're on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. I quite like Instagram because it's quite visual and it's quite a good way of sort of sharing videos and things about releases. But yeah, you know, you can find, even just Googling us, you can find us pretty easily.
Fantastic. Alex, aka Soul Intent, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on tonight's show, my man.
You too, mate.